Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Rich Politics with me, your host, Richard Taylor. I'm so excited about my guest today because I've got someone on the show that I disagree with politically. Can you believe that? Well, you know me, just a Welshman ranting about all things politics. And don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms, on Facebook, Twitter, but more importantly on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Well, my guest today is someone who believes in Welsh independence. And of course, you all know that I don't. But that doesn't matter because Rich Politics is about having people on with different opinions. That's the idea of having a broadcast channel that allows anything and everything to come on within reason. But today we're not discussing Welsh independence. We're discussing something called universal basic income. Now, you may have heard of it. You may not have, but my guest will explain a little bit later what that's about. It's not universal credit, for those of you wondering. So please go ahead while I'm speaking, share the broadcast on Facebook and on YouTube and get people on as well. And if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to ask. We try our best to answer them if we're able to. Well, my guest today's name's Geraint Jones. He's from my neck of the woods, really. Well, Clydach, near Swansea. Well, he's Jack Army kind of land, not quite Llanelli way, but I'm excited to have him on because I met him actually on social media, which is a great place to meet people. Not everybody, some people are idiots, but he's not one of them. He's a good boy. He's a good bloke, as we say, a good boy in Wales, as we say. Geraint, welcome to Rich Politics.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you. Now, Geraint, we've had kind of disputes online, and we both of us on universal basic income because you're an advocate for it. I wonder, first of all, would you explain to our viewers what is universal basic income?
Yeah, certainly. So a UBI, or universal basic income, is a regular, equal, and non-returnable cash benefit that is received individually by all citizens, regardless of their material and occupational situation. So, in other words, it's a monthly payment that everyone would have that's not means tested.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done a bit of research on this. So basically, for our viewers, what that means is whether you work or not, everybody gets a set amount of income in the country. That's what universal basic income is, regardless of whether they're employed or not. Now, why is this so different then from what we currently have with the benefit system through universal credit?
So, as things stand, we've got an economy which is largely based on, obviously the private sector and the public sector. Over the last few decades, our public sector has become extremely bloated, bureaucratic, and very time-consuming and limited opportunities as well. The private sector has got very corporate, in some ways very exploitative, and also with all that going on, we've also got a growing levels of poverty and a benefit system which isn't really working at the moment. So a UBI would come in and tackle it in two different ways. Firstly, it would give people who are in work that extra insurance, if you like, that if they were in work, they weren't getting the workplace rights they wanted, or the joy of the work they wanted, or if they're looking for new prospects, maybe they want to start their own business, a UBI would give them an opportunity to leave a workplace and go and find new opportunities. With regards to the benefit system, at the moment, there's a very complicated benefit system. Obviously, you mentioned universal credit, but there's also a whole host of other benefits that people have to apply for, including tax credits. Now, the problem with this system is that people have to claim and work very hard just to claim everything and make sure they're getting the right benefits they're entitled to. And the problem is sometimes people can end up in a trap where they can be claiming as much benefits as they can. However, if they were to find a part-time job, for example, they'd lose some of their benefits. So a UBI tackles that issue by ensuring that they've guaranteed source of income, even if they go finding part-time jobs or start their own business.
Yeah, but Geraint, surely, let's be honest here now, right? In a world where if you could not work and get an income, for actually not working, a benefit, if you like, as we call it today, for not actually working or going through any of the rigmarole you have to claim benefits as they currently stand, called universal credit and those other benefits. I mean, what incentive is there for people to actually want to work? We could end up with an economy that is struggling because people who work pay taxes, which generates the funds, which then is used, I should imagine, to support your claim of UBI. But then if people decide, well, you know what, what's the point going to work when I can get money for nothing? It's the old Dire Straits song, isn't it? Money for nothing, chicks for free. Why would people bother when they can get a basic income just for sitting at home?
Yeah, Rich, I see your point. I think that's one of the common criticisms of UBI is effects on productivity, effects on employment, and also, yeah, criticism that if we were taxing people in work to fund people out of work, then you wouldn't exactly be that happy about it if you were one of the people working. However, with UBI, when it comes to that situation, where first of all, with the funding model of it, we would need to address the tax system. I don't feel like just having a UBI brought out tomorrow at amount that would be, let's say, £1,000 a month. If we were to roll that out tomorrow for everybody in the United Kingdom, first of all, it'd be inflationary. And probably would lead to hyperinflation. So we would have to roll it out in a very controlled way, in such a way that, first of all, the tax system will need to be simplified. Having a complicated, complex tax system, which we have, where there's different tiers, there's different things that you can put against tax. So we need to go with a policy that the party Gwlad are advocating, which is a flat rate of income tax, which would be a lot simpler, and it wouldn't affect people earning. Basically everybody would contribute equally to this system. The other thing is, when it comes to actually funding the whole process in the first place, is we need to be fully aware that spending is funded by government borrowing. It's not just a simple model of the tax goes in, the spending comes out. We're talking here about purchasing government bonds, and we're borrowing, and then we have to pay back those bonds. That's how the system works.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if we had a tax system that enabled the UBI to be fiscally neutral, then we would end up with a system where we'd maintain stable currency and we'd maintain a stable UBI.
Well, I just a thought, AC. Look, I don't agree with UBI. I can't for the life of me work out how it would ever work. I mean, it would need a massive revolutionary change for it to happen, certainly. I mean, government borrowing is at an all-time high, not just because of the pandemic. It's been growing, for the last two decades. I mean, we're talking trillions of pounds. So the government is in debt, but then you're suggesting that people, just to play devil's advocate, don't work, and they receive a basic income. I mean, what kind of income are you talking about? £1,000 a month? £1,200 a month? What's the budget? What's the plan? How would it work? Who would receive it? And surely those who pay tax, like those of us who work, for example, we'd find that disproportionate and unfair. There's inequalities there. Now, we have a system already set up where those who are less fortunate themselves were unable to work for a whole number of legitimate reasons. We don't mind paying taxes to support them because we live in a society that supports those who are less or worse off than us. But surely this universal basic income does away with that to a certain extent and allows room for abuse as well. And of course, for government debt to increase, because if people aren't working, the economy is not growing, people aren't paying taxes, where does the government get its money from? It can't print anymore, can it?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rich. When it comes to the actual money that needed to be spent on a UBI, I've actually done some sums here, just to give us some sort of idea what figures we're dealing with. So the furlough cost during the COVID pandemic from March to December 2020 was £46.4 billion. The Department of Work and Pensions budget is approximately £200 billion. Now, I worked out that if we gave a £500 per month to every individual in the United Kingdom, it would have an annual budget of £314 billion. Now, as you can see, if we were to get rid of, implement a UBI, we wouldn't need a Department of Work and Pensions because that system would look after itself. So that's 200 billion saving, less the 314 billion figure right there. Now with furlough, that would be obviously absorbed into the sum as well, because there's no point furloughing anyone if everyone's getting a UBI. But when it comes to the question around work incentives and grievances amongst the working population about funding people to be out of work, I don't see UBI in that light, to be honest. I think a UBI, the purpose would be that the people in work would, this is not a cash giveaway. I feel like as if the people in work would be happy because they know that if they wanted to change job, they'd be easier for them to do that. And they'd know that people who are trying to find work would have somewhere to start as well.
Yeah, I understand that, but here's the problem. Our jobs market is a very small market, right? So if there aren't jobs available and you've got a choice, so you can either get a low paid job. So let's just say, take your figure, for example, of £500 a month. Let's just take that as a ballpark figure. So you can sit at home. I'm obviously exaggerating here. You earn £500 a month, but then you can get a job in Tesco stacking shelves for £500 a month after you paid your taxes. What are you going to do? You're going to stay at home. There's no incentive because the jobs market is small. It's not growing because there's not enough revenue going in to create more jobs because that comes out of tax. Whether we like it or not, Geraint, you and I know very well that the whole of our society is built on one thing, tax. Without that, there is no revenue. The government can't simply keep borrowing because the debt is so. Now, I want to talk about this because this has been rolled out in a few other countries. They have experimented this in a few other countries, and I've been doing some research before I spoke to you today. Also, obviously, during the pandemic, COVID, we've seen a kind of a UBI being rolled out in the furlough scheme, as you've already mentioned there, but it's the long-term sustainability. So what you're believing is that you have confidence in citizens of our country to say, right, okay, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to educate myself. I don't need to worry about money. I can go ahead and do it, not worry about paying my bills, and then obviously get a job or get the education I need to get the qualifications for a better paid job in the future. You've got a lot more trust in the citizens of our country than I have, Geraint. I have to be honest with you.
I feel that's a little bit of a pessimistic take there, Rich. I gotta say, I've got confidence that the UBI, if implemented well, obviously it's very important that it's planned very well. It wouldn't work with the current tax system. It wouldn't work without a good long-term analysis of the amount to give. I mean, if we just printed money and just gave it without analysing it, I think it could lead to a lot of problems. But when it comes to, I think the likelihood that people would just not do anything, I don't think that's the right approach either, because I think it'll free people up for volunteering, it'll free people up for community activities, free people up to maybe have more than one part-time job. It can free people up for, we've got a very an aging population. Healthcare needs and social care needs are not being met. So it'll free people up to tackle one of the biggest problems in the United Kingdom today, which is loneliness. So I don't think that it can just be seen as everybody will sit at home and there'll be no economy to talk about. I think, and the other thing to say is that if we were to actually implement it at a good level, it would actually boost economic output because more people would have more money to spend. And that would obviously in the long term lead to us being closer at balancing the budget than being more in deficit.
But surely they're spending the money the government have given them for free. Well, it's not free because it's come out of tax, isn't it? So it's kind of these big vicious cycle, isn't it? Now, just for the sake of it, because you've obviously done your homework on UBI, I know you're a big advocate for it. What are the pros and what are the cons then? Because you must realise there are the downsides. So you tell us what the pros are and tell us what the cons are, Geraint.
Yeah, of course. So the pros are, first of all, is that nobody would have to worry about running on zero. You'd be able to move jobs, you'd be able to train, you'd be able to go to university, be able to take up apprenticeships, you'll get paid. The other thing is it'll cut poverty. We've got a very impoverished country, very unequal country, and it'll go a long way towards tackling that. The other thing is the threat of automation to our economy. We've already got technology that can displace a lot of jobs. We've got 3D printers, we've got automatic cars. We've got the internet. We've got a lot of technology, which is going to take a lot of jobs away. We've got a globalized supply chain. So if somebody in another country, thousands of miles away, decides to open a factory there, they can take our jobs away. If we give people a UBI, it'll mean that they feel safe and secure here. They will not need to worry about their job being taken away, and they can seek to retrain. Also, it'll cut bureaucracy. A big part of the problem at the moment is the Department of Work and Pensions has got to try and assess every single person on what they're entitled to. Obviously, as you can imagine, it's a bureaucratic mess. The other thing is that also there'd be no incentive for people to try and commit fraud within the system because they get it anyway. And the other pro would be we live in the labour market, which, like you said earlier, there's a shortage of jobs. There's a shortage of the economy hasn't been growing as much as we would like it to. And what the UBI does is give every employee, every person, individual, better bargaining power within the overall economy. They can come along and say, look, I'm going to only take jobs that are worthwhile doing, that aren't going to hinder me, that aren't going to affect my personal life. And if you don't provide the workplace conditions that I want, then I'm going to go elsewhere. Obviously, I want to touch on the cons as well.
Yes, I was going to say, because it all sounds very optimistic and it sounds exciting. Yeah. So, but the reality for me, I listening to you and I think, yeah, that all sounds really good, but, and it's a big but, it doesn't add up, does it? I mean, what are the cons then? Give us the list of the cons then.
So yeah, so as I mentioned, one con earlier was obviously it's not cheap. It's going to be the cost of it is going to be
colossal. It's colossal, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, it's a huge cost. But like I mentioned, no one would have thought before COVID that we would have spent £46.4 billion between March and December 2020 in paying people to stay at home. I mean, that would not happen.
And that's on top of the Welsh government receiving just under £6 billion as well.
The Welsh government, their annual budget is £18.4 billion.
Yeah.
So that just gives you a bit of reference there. But obviously, so the cost is a big one. The other one would be the fact that it's being tested, there's been trials, but nothing on a big enough scale.
No, they tried it. Sorry to interrupt you. They tried it in Brazil, didn't they? That was one of the places. Sao Paulo, I think. I read some research on it this morning, and they tried it there. It's not so much. The idea sounds good to me, and it would to a lot of people, I suppose, because we want a fair society where everyone's equal. It's just the colossal cost of it and the idea that politicians, I mean, is it an optimistic dream that not just you carry, but many across the political spectrum here in Wales? I've heard a lot of Labour supporters and, maybe Welsh Conservatives here that feel that this might be appropriate. I haven't spoken to many Welsh Conservatives who think it is, but it is an opinion shared by a lot of people, isn't it? I know I've been speaking to a number of people who are pro-Welsh independence, for example. They'd support it. I've come across a few of those. I mean, it is a growing phenomenon and people are interested in it. But is it just a pipe dream, Geraint? Is it the reality? Is it worth fighting for? Is it going to happen?
I don't think so. It has actually got a lot of history that I'm not sure everyone's aware of, because for one, it's actually going on now at one place in the world. In Alaska, you've got the Alaska Permanent Fund, which has been going on since 1976, which pays every single citizen in Alaska a fixed monthly sum. And that's the long-term analysis of that has showed it hasn't had a negative effect on employment. The trials, obviously, you can't read into them too much just because they're small scale. We've had a Finland trial, and we've had 2 trials in Canada and trials in various other parts of the world. The effect they've had have been very positive, including improvements in mental health, less hospitalizations. We've had 0 changes in productivity with positive effects on employment. We've had people staying on in education longer. Overall, it's a very good picture. I just think that it's not a pipe dream. I think it will happen in the end. It's just, I feel like the alternative is a lot worse in the long term. I mean, a jobs-based economy is not what we're trying to get rid of. What we're trying to advocate is an independent small business owner economy. And I think that's what a UBI would help that, instead of having an economy dominated by big employers, either corporations or big public bodies like the NHS.
Well, surely you're creating a welfare state there, and this is a socialist project. Come on, Geraint. Surely you must recognise that. I mean, you know, we've socialism, obviously under Welsh Labour here in Wales. We know a lot about it, right? But I won't go into details. That's what it is, really. It's a socialist idea, isn't it?
Well, a lot of people would beg to differ. We've had the free market economist Milton Friedman described UBI as a negative income tax. So he was one of the biggest supporters of the sort of free market capitalist economy. We've also had Andrew Yang, who's running for mayor of New York at the moment. He's a big fan of UBI. So although I think it appeals cross-spectrum, I see why it appeals to socialists and people who would support sort of more free market economics. Because I think under the capitalist sort of look on it, it gives everyone an opportunity to pursue their own individual aspirations. And from a socialist point of view, it provides like a safety net, or a welfare safety net, if you like, to ensure that no one ends up with basically being homeless or unemployed.
Well, look, I can see how this would work in a poor country, right? If it was somewhere in India in some shanty town where everyone's given a basic income, I can see it working there. But come on, in the UK, I mean, I really can't see it happening. I mean, not just because of the fiscal impact of it, but I'm not as optimistic as you over our citizens here in the UK or in Wales. I just can't get my head on the fact that if I could stay at home and just get enough income to get me by and pay my bills and everything else. I mean, as much as I believe in people's aspirations, and not everyone thinks the same, some people will want to better their lives. A lot of people look at the welfare state now. The cost to the government currently, universal. I'm not sure what the latest figures from the DWP are, but they're staggeringly high. Of course, since the pandemic, people have lost jobs. There's less work about. People have relied on government handouts. I mean, the idea of a universal basic income right now surely is something that is not on people's radars, and it's not going to happen, is it?
I wouldn't say it's not on people's radars. There's a lot of people supporting it at the moment. Politically speaking, the Green Party is a long-term supporter of it. Here in Wales, Gwlad support it. Also, the Senedd have recently had a lot of discussions about it, with Welsh Labour and Plaid Cymru showing support for it as well. So I think there's a lot of noise around it. I don't think it's something that everyone's ignoring. But in terms of the long-term sort of economic outlook, I just think that if it's implemented well and the tax system is adjusted to take into account to ensure that we don't enter into a sort of inflationary period, I generally don't think that it is seen as a negative, because at the end of the day, it'll boost economic output by giving people more money to spend, and that, if done well, will only lead to growth in the long term.
Well, folks, you've heard it here on Rich Politics, UBI. If you've never heard of it before, you have now. As you can tell, I don't agree with it, but Geraint loves it, and he thinks it'll be good for our country. But that's the whole idea, see, to have different debates about different issues around, not just universal basic income, but politics as well. So, Geraint, I want to finish off my time with you, because our time is almost up, unfortunately, and ask you, ahead of the elections in May, should they go ahead? I mean, we'll find out a little bit today. And what time is it now, Ashley? Well, we should know by the end of today, but certainly. What's your thoughts then? Do you think there's going to be some changes in the Senate? Do you think Plaid will make any inroads, any ground? Will Labour concede any seats here in Wales? What's your thoughts? And what do you think about Abolish as well? Of course, I'm standing for them and with them and whatever else. What's your thoughts, Geraint?
Well, Rich, I wish you very well with your prospects in the election. I've seen you having quite a big campaign on social media, which seems to be working out for you. So I wish you well with that.
Thank you.
In terms of the Senedd election, it's quite quite a difficult one to call, I think. COVID has changed a lot of things. A lot of things we thought would have been completely unrealistic 12 months ago have happened. There's, in terms of Labour and Plaid Cymru, perhaps there might be a changing of the guard. Maybe it'll be a Plaid-dominated coalition with Labour. That's what it seems like to me is the most likely sort of outcome. From my own point of view, I'd like to see the smaller parties gain a few seats, including GLAD, Neil McAvoy's party, the Green Party. I'd like to see them do well, and of course, if no one else is willing to raise a voice for some of the policies, let's say, that haven't worked out well in recent months, I of course would support the Abolish Party as well. We just need to make sure everyone has a voice.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to give everyone a fair shout. I mean, because being elected is about representing, what the people, the electorate want. So if they want to get rid of devolution, they've got to have a voice somewhere, haven't they? And it's the same if they want independence, they have to have a voice there as well. I think there's going to be a lot of splitting of the votes, certainly with the independents, because you've got Neil McAvoy still yet to register his party, but then you've got Plaid and you've got GLAD and these smaller fringe parties. But I do, I think the elections are going to be very interesting in Wales this May. I think there's going to be a few shocks, not just because of recent polls, but I just sense the public mood is a lot different to what it has been in previous elections here in Wales. I think we're going to see a slightly higher turnout than we have, because it's always very low, as you know, for Welsh elections. I think there's going to be some big shocks in store for people. I'm looking forward to it, certainly. And you mentioned GLAD. I know that you're a supporter of GLAD, aren't you? Yeah, I thought you were again. I'd be delighted to have somebody on from GLAD to talk about what they're about, because I know that they believed in Brexit, didn't they? And they want independence. So slightly different from some of the many others who are supportive of Welsh independence, who have been anti-Brexit. And they've had to swallow that pill and get over it, if you know what I mean. But Geraint, listen, it's been wonderful having you on Rich Politics. Thank you for coming on, and to all my viewers as well, an opportunity for you to hear a little bit about someone who believes in universal basic income, what it means and what it looks like, how it will be funded, the pros and the cons. And of course, you can make your own mind up. You don't need to believe what I say or what Geraint says. It's entirely up to you. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I hope to catch you the same time next week on Rich Politics. And don't forget, Friday night, we're talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol with my guest, John Yates. I'll catch you soon on Rich Politics.